All right, I've got 10 o'clock on my end, and I like to start on time so we can make sure we make good use of your time. So thank you for being here. It's our off the shelf new year. Happy New Year to everybody. And with that, it's also the last day of January. I swear the longest month of the year. So we can celebrate for a few different reasons today. We're a step closer to spring. And also, you guys are spending your time today to learn, hopefully, at least something new in our conversation today. I'm pretty excited. I've been holding on to this topic for quite some time, and I thought, what a good way to start the new year with something I'm pretty excited about. Uh, Hopefully, the material's not too dense today. It should be some easy listening, some good learning, and hopefully you can take away something that you can apply day to day into the work that all of you do. So thanks for taking your time to join. We really appreciate all of you taking time to hone in on your leadership and supervisory skills. The work that all of you do is so valuable for our state. And our team takes a lot of pride in knowing that hopefully we can give you a little bit more information to support you in the roles that you have. If you can, try to be distraction free. This hour is for you to learn and to enjoy. And so if you want to limit distractions, go for it and really take some time to be present. We'll jump in. As usual, it's being recorded. And then also we've got Melody Fico here with us today. She is doing ASL interpreting. And so if you need that, you go ahead and pin her, and her video will stay on your current screen. So thank you, Melody, for being here. Also, since you've registered this where it's been recorded, we will be sending out and adding this to our off-the-shelf library, but sending it out the recorded version as well if you need to leave early or want to finish it later on. So that will be available to you. I take just a second to introduce myself. I've been with the DHRM leadership team for about a year and a half now. It's so much fun. I really enjoy it. I've probably seen or met a lot of you in the last year and a half being out and teaching and training and then doing this off the shelf. So if you're new and we don't know each other, my name is Sydney. And if we do know each other, it's good for you to be here. Thank you for being here. Couple of announcements that we have before we jump in today. I'm sure all of you are feeling maybe a little bit of pressure with pay for performance, kind of being in the thick of it right now. In the next several months, we'll be doing a lot of rating and reviewing. Hopefully your one-on-one conversations are being impactful and helpful for your employees. Just for the time that we're in right now, being in January, we do have a few off-the-shelf series. You'll have access to these links when we're done here, but these are previous off-the-shelves that we did that can help you in your performance planning with this pay for performance right now. So know that there are these hour-long webinars that can be helpful for you, as well as resources inside each of these. So if you're in a place where this might be helpful, know that that's available. And then also we are going to continue on with the Apple optional training. Courses are going to start in April and go till June. And that's going to be focused a lot on results, rating, reviews, quite timely, hopefully with the timing of your performance years with each of your agencies. Registration will be opened up here very shortly for both the Wasatch Front and our rural areas. So stay tuned, watch your emails for that if you want to come and attend. And then our next announcement here, of course, we'll do another off the shelf in February, last Wednesday of the month, like usual at 10 o'clock. For those of you, most of you may know Dr. Dan Chase. He's going to be leading out that webinar. He's so knowledgeable, should be a fun time. He's going to be talking about having good relationships with people that we work with, even if it's difficult. He's got some good content. It's always a good time with him. So we'll be sending the link to get registered for that during this webinar, and then we'll have a couple other times in your email sent out to you to register as well. Feel free to at any time to share that link with any of your colleagues and those that might benefit from it too, and to have them get registered. All right, so for our discussion today, just to help keep me organized, but hopefully help with you guys as well. These are the three things we're going to focus our time on today. We've got a few little breakouts here. First subject here that we're going to talk about is how our language it really is going to impact and how it impacts the relationships that we have, right? And this mostly focused here on our professional relationships, of course, but even just socially. And then we'll discuss, how our culture, and when I say culture, what I mean here is our organizational culture. How do we do our work day to day? What language do we speak when we're at work? What kind of values do we have? What's our mission? All of those things go into what we, know as organizational culture. And then how is that impacted by our communication and the reciprocity between that? And then lastly, and I think this will hopefully be the most helpful thing for all of you as leaders, supervisors, managers. I've got 5 communication practices that you can look at maybe integrating into the work that you're doing every day. Maybe take a look at how you're communicating now with your employees, collaborating with other agencies, with the public and our communities, and maybe adopt or adapt some of these practices. So that's the flow for today. I'm pretty excited about it. So just a little bit of background here. Well, first of all, I found these images here of our great state. I love living in Utah because of the diversity in our weather, but also in our landscape. I love to be outside. So enjoy some of these black and white pictures of our beautiful state as we go through. But first thing here is I introduce our topic here. A lot of you may know I just had a baby a few months ago, my first, and will be my only baby. She's a little miracle. Her name is Sailor, and she just turned 6 months old on Monday. And I am so anxious for her to be able to start to talk. I am quite the talker and have been the majority of my life. And I love words, I love language, and I love to talk, but I also like to read and to listen and to write and all of those things too. And so I just wanted to share with you every day. I feel like when I'm feeding her and playing with her, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for you to talk back with me now. So hopefully here in the next few months, I get to experience that. But I think she's going to be pretty excited too to start to talk. But in more of a professional side of why I'm excited about this topic, there's a few things in my background that helped me to develop this passion and this love for words and for language. Couple things growing up, my mom had a really large vocabulary, something that I think when I was a child, I was annoyed with at times. But as I got older, I really learned to appreciate that. And anytime she would say a word I didn't know, she always told me I needed to get the dictionary and look it up. And I think I did that more often than I probably wanted to as a kid. But as I've gotten older, I've really learned to appreciate that and still have a dictionary, even though we can just look at things online. But that dictionary got a lot of use. And so as I learned to have a love and a value and appreciate a large vocabulary, a couple other things have guided my passion with this. I joined the private sector and working in insurance for over a decade. And if any of you, hopefully we've got some insurance folks here with the Department of Insurance, but all of us, I'm sure, have some sort of an insurance policy or another. And if we look at the language that's in those policies, or if you've had to file any kind of a claim, or when you're shopping around for insurance, you know the headache of the language that is used in the insurance world. And after a decade of being there, I feel like I had a pretty good grasp of the language that we use with insurance. And then I joined the government and came to the public sector here after finishing college, grad school, switched a few different agencies in my time here with the state of Utah. And we know being government workers, we have our own language, right? And when we work with the public, and even maybe talking with our friends and family, we get maybe a little comfortable with the language that we use or acronyms that we use. And so today, as we explore this a few different topics here, I want you to take some time and think about your own language and the words that you use, the habits that you've formed. What are you integrating your values that matter to you in the communication that you have with the people around you? And then think too, maybe a little bit broader, the conversations, the communication, the language that happens when we're working together as agencies. One way or another, all of us get the pleasure of working together and working with one another. And sometimes it might feel a little siloed, like we only know how to speak the language in our own department, or maybe in our own division, or maybe even in our own office. But what can we do to explore and learn the language of other agencies? So collaboration can be more helpful, but also so that we can learn more about each other, and our conversations can be more impactful. All right, this was brought, I used this in the little blurb when we made the announcement, but for those of you that have been in any of my trainings, I tend to think really from a macro level and then bring it down to that micro level, or vice versa, depending on the topic. But for today, let's look at this, maybe from a micro and out to a macro. Words in general, right? They're small little pieces that make up this components of our language. And then language, how do we learn our language and what kind of impact does it have? And then as you can see here, right, it impacts our relationships, and how are our relationships maintained? How are they enjoyed? How did they get transformed? And that's through our communication. And then communication, once again, governed by our culture, and specific to our organizational culture here, being supervisors for the state of Utah. All right, so I'm going to spend just a couple minutes here talking about the words and the power of words. After all, that is the topic, of how our words matter. And I'm not sure, I sometimes wish this is a little more interactive, but just think for a second. I don't know, this was a new word for me, and maybe it's a new word for you. It's pronounced logophile, if anybody's wanting to know. And a few of you might even be Googling the meaning of it. But what logophile, the definition is that it's a lover of words. And I now consider myself a logophile. Maybe we'll add that to the resume. But hopefully there's a few of you too on this call that are logophiles yourself, that you have a love or a passion for words. And so let's, as we explore today and have some discussion, think about the words that you use, and then your love for them, or maybe your dislove for them. But we all have words that we can learn, and that's because here in our English language there are 170,000 active words. New words are constantly being added to our language, with technological advancements, cultural shifts, global events. I don't think any of us probably had heard of COVID-19 until COVID-19 was a thing. Probably a lot of us, hadn't heard of or said very often, are you on mute when we're at work? And now it's become part of our day-to-day lives with these technological advancements. We're streaming here today, doing webinars. So lots of new words come to be because of these changes. But we do have, there's about 47,000 words historically in the English language that are obsolete now, that are no longer used. This is all according to the Oxford Dictionary, of course, but just think about it. That's a lot of words in our language. And then this was interesting as I was doing some research for this. On average, and once again, this is on average, right? We all have different professions, different ways we spend our time, our entertainment sources, the sizes of our families, our social circles, all of those things influence this. But on average, we consume about 100,000 words a day. And this can be words that we're speaking, words that we are reading or hearing as well. And then once again, on average, and there's some argument, I guess, here on how many words a day that we speak. But once again, on average, 16,000 words a day. And so take just a second and think about just, your shift at work. Are you a talker at work? Are words part of your day-to-day work that you're doing, whether with your employees, with the public, with other agencies? And then, if we're speaking that much a day, we form natural habits. We have behaviors, whether they're learned or not, behaviors that we exemplify and how we speak, the words that we use. And so all of that, when we think about it, gives us a basis to really be able to explore and integrate new words, or maybe what we're saying, have our words be more impactful. And so let's discuss that a little bit further. These little examples here, these are called idioms, another new word if you're not familiar, right? But when we use words in a context that actually don't have the meaning that they're meant to have. So you can go through here, right? Being as cool as a cucumber. Don't spill the beans. I don't think we're all walking around with beans, in our pockets. Raining cats and dogs. I mean, if we were to look at that literally, I don't think I want dogs and cats falling out of the sky, right? Believing that when pigs fly, we all know that pigs don't fly. You've got ants in your pants. We use these common sayings a lot in our language, and it helps us to relate and make connection with people. But also, if you were learning the English language, this might be really challenging. And so that's something to consider too when we use kind of these idioms in our conversations. Another example here of why our words matter. You take a second, you can read here this saying on your screen. And as you do, think about this. Really, our word choice can change the perception. We speak for a reason, right? And it's because we want to be heard. And so how we're choosing to say our words or write our words really matters. Once again, you don't have to raise your hand, but I read this thing like 3 times, and even reading it now, I'm still reading it wrong. The first 2 lines, right? So word placement really matters, but our brains are trained to really pick up what we're reading, and it's okay to have those mistakes happen. Our brains are so high functioning that we still know what this is trying to say, even if we're reading it incorrectly. Kind of interesting. So think about this, when you're writing an email or sending a text, how often do you miss a word or transpose words or use the wrong word or misspell a word? Maybe you've had some embarrassing things happen with that. Or, the impact wasn't what you wanted it to be. So be mindful too. Part of this is just having us slow down, take some time in how we're speaking, how we're writing, so that our messages are clear. And one other little example here I wanted to do, this is called the Stroop effect. I don't know if anybody has participated in this before, but kind of interesting here. So just take a second and read the color of each word out loud to yourself, or silently if you want, but just read those words on your screen. All right, and then I'm gonna go to this screen, and then once again, read the color of each word out loud. You might have noticed a difference here. When the color matches the word, it's a lot easier for us to read, right? We can zoom right through it. But when the color and the word do not match, it becomes a lot harder. Like I said, this is John Stroop, psychologist back in the 30s, developed this to really, he was measuring a few different things with our brains and how they process information. And he developed the Stroop effect. So kind of fun example here of it's not just always the word that we're using, but how we're presenting our words. Something as simple as a different color can change the whole meaning and make it harder to understand. All right, and then one last little example here about words before we jump into the majority of this content here. Kind of interesting. I love our American history. I think we have a lot to learn, and I take a lot of pride in being an American. And so when I can incorporate anything from our American leaders, I try to do that in each of my trainings. But this is something kind of cool. I don't know if many of you know a lot about Abe Lincoln or not, right? But I would say probably one of the best leaders that we've had, in my opinion. We can argue about that later if you want to, but you know, he did a lot of good things. He had a really strong work ethic and a lot of really strong leadership skills. He was known for his leadership skills. But one of the things that I didn't know about him when I was doing some research on this, he had this habit, and I would say probably a healthy habit of hot letters. I'm not sure if anybody has heard of this term or not, but what would happen with him when things were getting frustrated or he would get angry, regardless of a situation, he would go and write down how he was feeling, or write down a letter to the group of people or the individual that he was frustrated with or upset with or angry even with. And the interesting thing is he'd take this time and write down everything, you know, these hot letters, and then he never sent them. And so as historians were going through and found these hot letters, at the bottom of them, they were never signed and never sent. Not always something that's going to work for everybody, okay? But what we can learn from this, right, is that he, before he spoke, chose to write down how he was feeling when he was getting frustrated. Oftentimes, I am probably one of the worst culprits with this. If I'm angry or frustrated, man, I just want to talk it out right then. And it's not always helpful because I haven't collected my thoughts. I'm letting emotions guide my words. And what I appreciate about this example, right, that he was able to pause, write down how he was feeling, you know, and then chose to not send his words on. But you know, you can relate this to maybe I know a lot of people might journal, or they'll write something down and rip it up, throw it away. Some people even burn their papers, whatever, you know, works for people. But the idea here, right, is that our words really do matter. And if we're choosing to let our emotions guide our words, oftentimes we say a lot of things that we might regret. And when you think about the work that you do, especially in a supervisor manager role with your employees, and now that you're meeting with them, maybe even on a more regular basis and having conversations about their performance, and just about them in general, we need to be mindful that we're allowing ourselves the time and the space to really be prepared to say the words that we want to say. And then we're not letting our emotions, you know, put us in a position where we might regret what we say or not mean what we say, even if it's unintentional. So I really like this example, hot letters, never signed, never sent, here by Abe Lincoln. But jumping into the next, right? So words, obviously, our words are put together to combine the language that we use. I really liked this. This is from Brene Brown. I like her. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with her work. But she talks about how language can be a portal to meaning making, you know, having this connection. She's a huge advocate on connection. But this healing, learning, and self-awareness, having access to the right words can open up entire universes. And then without accurate language, we might struggle to get the help that we need. We may not always be able to regulate or manage our emotions and experiences in a way that allow us to move through them productively, and our self-awareness is diminished. If you think about, there might be times, whether, you know, at work, at home, in your personal lives, whatever it might be, where you know, are emotional, whether you're frustrated, you're angry, you're confused, whatever it is. And there might be a time where you're like, I don't have the words to describe how I'm feeling, you know, and that's okay. What Brené's trying to teach us here is that language and finding the right words, right, helps us to be able to regulate and then manage those emotions. Being able to label things can be really helpful when it comes to our emotions and our experiences. And that just takes time, and it takes opportunities to be able to see words in a different way. For those of you that are linguistics maybe out there that are on the call or just have a passion for learning in general, these next couple slides are a little bit dense, but I think it's interesting when we think about how our language is comprised and what the components that belong to it. So really in our language, there's 5 different components here. So the syntax, the morphology, phonology, the semantics, and pragmatics. We'll spend most of our time talking about the pragmatics. That's why I have it kind of highlighted here. But I wanted to just quickly go through the components here and just have you maybe think about, when we speak in the language that we use, we may not be thinking about, oh, how did we even learn to speak this way, And it's kind of interesting. So the first thing here, syntax, this goes kind of in a chronological order as far as how our language is formed. But the syntax, right? So this is the rules that govern how our sentences are basically formed and put together, how we're arranging words and phrases to make that happen. So for the most part, a sentence usually has a subject, a verb, an action that's happening, and then an object. So an example, right? The dog chased the ball, pretty simple. So we learn syntax. We might even not label it that, as children and when we're going through school and learning all of that. Then there's this morphology piece of it. We take a word in the sentence and we add maybe a prefix or an affix to the word, and it changes the entire meaning of the word. So if you were to take the example here of the word love, and if you add the ly to the end of that, right? Lovely, maybe kind of the same thing, maybe not. You can add ing, right? And it changes it to loving. You can be lover. You can add that prefix of un, and it is unloved. So totally changes the meaning. That's the morphology piece of it. And we learn how to do that as we go through school and we get older and we have new opportunities and experiences that guide how we're speaking. And then this phonology, this is an interesting, I don't think I'd ever heard this word before and realized the impact that it has on our language. But this is how the patterns of the words and how they sound. Okay, so for an example here, if you were to go through all the words in the English language, the letters T and N are never found together in any word. And it's because phonetically it doesn't sound correctly. Oh, someone just said partner. Very good. Well, thank you for, I try not to look at the comments and I just saw that. So that's interesting. And maybe it doesn't start with that. So thank you for that. I'm going to look into that. Well, yeah, Leighton, right? Clinton. But how we speak, this phonology, the sound of the words that we're using, cat, hat, sat, pat, it's just the changing of one letter, but it changes the entire word. That also goes into this phonology. So this is the form. This is how our language gets formed, right? And how we speak it, how it sounds, all of that. And then this next step is the content. So semantics. And we hear the word semantics used kind of loosely in our conversations, but it's specific to language, right? This is the rules that kind of govern the meaning or the content of the words that we're putting together. And there's lots of different semantics. I'm providing a couple examples here that are kind of fun. I always get these confused, homophones and homonyms, right? So new and new, they sound the same, but they're spelled different and have different meanings. All the different sales, once again, they sound the same, different meanings. And then you've got the homonyms, same spelling, but totally different words. So you've got a bat, the creepy little night creature, and then like a baseball bat. You've got a park, that you take your kids to and you play at, and then you're parking your car, saw and saw. So there's all sorts of examples like this. So once again, things that might make our words hard to understand and can be confusing at times, especially if you were to be learning the language. But also, as we communicate, it's important to know these rules that govern our language to make sure, once again, that we're saying exactly what we want to say in the correct way, so that as the listener, they're understanding what you're meaning to say, and your communication is clear. And lastly, and this is what I wanted to spend a little bit more time on, these pragmatics. So this is the use. So we've all been taught how to speak. We've all been taught how to write sentences, all of those things. But this use of language really gets to be individualized as we get older. How we're choosing to communicate, and then incorporating social aspects into our language. Pragmatics also include this nonverbal communication, which we could probably spend a whole nother hour on. And then making sure that our conversations are appropriate in the situations that we're in. An example of this, right? If you're in a funeral home, you're not probably going to be communicating and telling jokes and trying to make people laugh, right? That would be a social situation of making sure you're using the right kind of language. This here in bold in the middle, right? Knowing what to say and when to say it and how to say it. I think this is going to be a lifelong thing that all of us are trying to learn and master. This happens, when you have kids, trying to make sure you're saying the right thing. As you become a supervisor, and you start being responsible for the performance of other people and having those conversations, that can be a new language and communication curve for a lot of us. Our nonverbal communication is a big deal. What are we saying without actually saying it? So all of these things make up this pragmatics, or the use of our language in how we're speaking day to day. These are some skills that some of you might be masters at. But I think out of all of these, and I know it's a little bit small, but there's always something that we can learn. And so take a look through here. Like I said, you'll get access to these slides. But there's these skills that to help us to be more clear in our communication and more competent. I like this idea of using appropriate volume, speed, and body distance. That's something I have spoke loud my whole life. and so always trying to be mindful of, okay, I need to lower my voice. I speak fast. And so now even talking to you, I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious, thinking, oh, am I speaking too quickly here? But and am I enunciating my words okay? But all of those things really matter, right? And this isn't so that we all become perfectionists in our communication. It just is giving you an opportunity to look at some skills that you might be able to develop to help you become a better or more competent communicator here in the workplace. I like this idea too of repairing when a conversation goes wrong. How many of us are good at doing that? Do we know how to do that? Do we have the words, and are we using the right words to make sure that we are repairing it and not making it maybe even get worse? Being concise and getting to the point, that's always a challenge for some people. And I might be one of those. But here, once again, list of skills. Hopefully that can be helpful for you to look at and see what maybe you could today integrate into your work you're doing. So Nathaniel Hawthorne, right? He, American author, novelist, he had this saying, words so innocent and powerless as they are, if they're just standing alone in a dictionary, but how potent they can be for good and, for evil when they become in the hands of one who knows how to combine them. And so each of us as communicators, and then, take it a step further as leaders, especially for the state of Utah here, are we using our words for good? I hope not for evil, but maybe unintentionally. They can be so powerful. All right, and so as we look at once again this organizational culture and our communication in there, I have a few examples. This was actually a lot of fun for me to do. I prior to coming over to DHRM, I worked for human services prior to being health and human services. And of course, they have their own entire set of language and words and how they communicate, very different when I came over to HR. And then they had their own set of words, and like I had mentioned, being the private sector and insurance, all of their words. And so I did a little bit of research here. For the sake of time, I wanted to include a lot more, but I picked a few agencies that we have and trying to make some impact here on how language really can affect the work that we do within each of our agencies. So before we jump into those examples, think about this, right? So I mentioned this, the words that we use are usually out of habit and convenience, because when we know something, we get pretty comfortable with just knowing that, and that's how we're going to always speak. That's what we might always say. You might even think about when you do performance reviews or your one-on-ones, your quarterly evaluations, or anytime you're talking, by the time you get to maybe your last employee, you might be thinking, oh, I'm kind of having the same conversation that I had from the beginning with the first person, and that's because we do form habits, and it might be convenient. My challenge to you would be think about, and make sure you're setting aside some time to make it individualized. Think about the words that you're using.
All
right, so here
interpreters now.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
We're just switching interpreters now.
Thank you, appreciate that.
No worries.
Okay, so this was fun collecting this, and just take a second. This is not all inclusive, okay? If I were to include every acronym that we had across our state, and in the work that we do, man, this would have taken up multiple slides. But these were some common acronyms that I'm familiar with in the work that I've done so far, being a public sector worker. And so kind of interesting when we look at this list of acronyms, how many of these do you know? Are you familiar with? Do you know what they stand for? If someone were to ask you right now and quiz you on this, are there ones that you don't know? And if you don't, that's okay. We're not expected to know everything about every agency here. But what can be helpful is to expand our knowledge about the acronyms that we use across the state. So that when we're working together and supporting each other, or if we're working with the public and they're working with multiple agencies, we have a common knowledge. We're speaking the same language here. A couple resources that I found, and I'm sure there's more out there. These were just a couple that I found quickly here. UDOT actually on their website, and I have a link here. So shout out to UDOT here. They actually have a list of acronyms on their webpage. And man, there were a ton of acronyms that I'd never even heard of. And so I think that is a great resource for that agency. There's also the legislative office put together some social service acronyms. So there's a link there as well. It might be a tad, I wouldn't say outdated. It is from a few years ago, I think. With COVID, there might be some additional acronyms that could be added to that list. But interesting. So when we speak to one another, or when we're speaking, to our families, or we're speaking to the public, are we using these acronyms and just assuming that they know what we're talking about? I remember when I had first started with the state and someone says, well, you've got to call Eric. And I'm like, and what's Eric's last name? And maybe you guys have had that experience too, not understanding that Eric was an acronym for getting in touch with payroll and all of that. And so I'm sure depending on the agencies that you work for, you have even more acronyms in there. But what can be helpful is making sure when we're having conversations that whoever is listening to us is aware, and that we're explaining, and breaking this out and providing help that way. But this is how we speak, right? We speak in acronyms, especially I think in the public sector. But it can be helpful to make sure that our respondents, are educated, and if not, that we can educate them on what they mean. So, and please don't be offended if your agency has a list of acronyms that you've put together too. These are just a couple quick ones that I put together here that can be helpful. All right, so here's some more maybe specific agency examples and the power of words that are used here. So a handful of our agencies across the state employ law enforcement officers. And we've all heard of Miranda rights in some capacity or another. And what you may not know that when it's applicable, officers are trained and they've got to have this memorized, right? And they've got to recite it to the person in custody. And if they don't do that, right, then the case can be suppressed in court or basically thrown out. And so how important for an officer to know if they're in that situation that they've got to do that, or, the case can be dismissed there, suppressed. Really important to know that. Another agency example here, this was so interesting to me as well. So I got some help here from a DPS communications team out in Richfield. So shout out to them. Great group of leaders over there that gave me some information here. I wanted to learn some more about how dispatch works. We all hope that when we call 911, right, that we get the help that we need. and what a high pressure, high liability for our dispatchers and those teams they're helping us in probably our most vulnerable times. So I reached out to them and asked them exactly what they need to say when they answer the phone, right? And this is what they've developed, and it's aligned with the national standards here. But 911, what is the location of your emergency? And they review this every year, make sure that they're doing what they need to do. They take this very seriously because obviously lives are at stake here. And they work, like I said, with the national federal standards to make sure they're staying in line with those policies and procedures. But once again, very interesting. I don't know of any other job where we answer the phone for work and the first thing out of our mouth has to be, 911, what is the location of your emergency? So appreciate the hard work that they do and their sacrifice, their service, to keep all of us and our families safe on that end. And our kind of final agency example here, another specific agency. Well, I don't know if it's specific because all agencies have, policies and procedures. But I want you to just take some time and think about any policies that are specific to your agency. If you've had the joy of reading a policy word for word, we know that they are not user-friendly when it comes to reading. They're organized well, but oftentimes the language that is used can be hard if you're not familiar with it. And so appreciate those that are helping us to guide us in writing policies and procedures to help us and protect us for liability, but also to make sure that things are fair and to keep us safe. Policy language is its own language in and of itself again, and I'm grateful we've got experts in our state that are willing to do that and to review those. So like I said, all of our agencies, I know we all have different examples of the language that we use, but it's helpful to know so that we can all try to speak, like I said, the same language. All right, so this is, we'll wrap up here with this last part, kind of more of the practical application here, giving you some resources of what you can take back with you. I've got 5 practices here that hopefully can be helpful and just help you to self-reflect, or maybe even have conversations with your peers, your employees, your supervisors, and maybe apply some of these practices when you go back to work after this. So this first one here, we talked a little bit about this before, but word choice can change perception. And so thinking about what will my words do before I speak them? And what other new words can I include in my conversations? Now we know with perception, right? There's a lot of subjectivity to that. And but the clearer we can be as leaders and how we're communicating, and that starts with using the best words that we can to make the best impact, the better off that we will be, and the relationships can be improved this way. The second practice here is this intent versus impact. And this is one of those things too, where I could probably spend another hour just talking about this. I think I speak for all of us when I say that our intentions when we're working, especially in a management leadership role, our intentions are always good. We want what's going to be best. We're hoping for that. But sometimes what we want and maybe even what we say doesn't end up giving us the impact that we were hoping for, or the outcome. And when we think about that, even though your intentions might be good, and then if you have poor impact, what can we do to rectify that? What can we change? And so asking yourself these questions can be helpful, right? What are my intentions when I speak? Am I trying to convey something that's really important? And if I am, what do I need to do to be as clear as possible? Or am I, in a place where my intention is to be helpful because maybe performance needs to be improved, and this might be a sensitive or a difficult conversation. So how can I be mindful of that, but still make sure that I'm conveying the information that I need to as a manager. And then another question, what impact do I want my words to have? Now, when you're talking, day to day with your colleagues, coworkers, you might just be having loose conversations. That's fine. Impact, is really low. But when you're in a leadership role, oftentimes you're in a position where your communication needs to have a specific impact. And so think about that. How do I want this to end? And what can I do in the words that I'm going to say to result in the correct impact? This third practice here, offering feedback. We all know that as a supervisor, a lot of your job's offering feedback, right? And feedback, remember, can be not just how to improve performance or anything like that, or to learn new skills, but feedback can also be it is a form of recognition and praise. Feedback can be positive feedback. It doesn't always have to be negative. So keep that in mind when you see feedback. But think about this too. What positive keywords can I use to deliver feedback to my employees? So for example, are you just saying, good job on that? and that's not, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to do, but is it as impactful as you want it to be? Could you use a different word to be more impactful? Does that matter to your team? Does it matter to the employee? Does it matter to you? So think about that. What words are you using? And maybe what words could you start substituting to have a different impact for your employees? This idea of remember to say what you mean and to mean what you say, just don't be mean. And we can follow this example of even writing down what you want to say. Planning ahead can be helpful too when it comes to feedback. Communication practice here, number 4. This was an interesting concept. So I have to look at my note here. Yeah, Paul English, my goodness. He is co-founder of kayak.com. I've never used the website, but I know it gets a lot of feed. Anyway, he came up with this idea of a 5-word performance review. I don't know if anybody else has heard of this or not, but kind of interesting. So if you were asked to do a performance review for each of your employees, what 5 words would you use to describe their performance? And what he suggests, try to include 3 or 4 positive words here. And then, maybe 1 or 2 words, not that they're negative words, but opportunities for them to improve their performance. Something for them to think about maybe differently. And so I would challenge you, if this is your thing, right? Next time you go to do a performance review, if you had to just have your conversation or, write these 5 words down and give it to your employee, let them think about it for a day or a few days and then come back. Would your conversation perhaps be more purposeful? Would it be more, would you be more assertive in what you're able to say? Would your employees maybe be more responsive? Instead of just speaking so much or maybe not enough, these 5 words could kind of guide the conversation. Doesn't mean, once again, that you have to do this. It's just an idea to maybe look at how to do things differently. Another resource here, and once again, you'll have the link to this. University of Maryland put this together, and I think it'll be a super helpful resource for all of you when it comes to describing performance in these performance plans. They have a good performance and a poor performance category, and then different categories within each of that, different behaviors, right, regarding performance, and words that you can use to describe that performance. So if you struggle to maybe have a lot of multiple words to use to describe performance, and you feel like you're just using the same words every time, this resource might be really helpful to you to provide you some new words that you can incorporate into your performance plans. And then lastly here, this last communication practice, right? This was a new concept for me, and I'm still trying to process it in my own mind. So give me a little space here when I try to explain this to all of you. And once again, this is not something you have to do. It's just a different way of looking at it. So remembering to ask questions. Okay, so what questions can I ask to have my employees contemplate their own choices and actions? And some of the research behind this, you could say something like, great job with this project. right? And you're showing praise, you're showing recognition, you're building some rapport there. And that helps with trust between you and your employees. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, continue to keep doing that. But if you want to maybe dig a little deeper, you could ask questions instead of just making the statement. You could say, what do you like about this project? You know what, and what has helped you to complete this project on time? Ask them questions so that they're communicating more to you than you are to them about the work that they're doing. This idea of remembering to ask, not to just to tell, can be really helpful here too. So think about that when you sit down with your employees, you know, or even in your own performance review, and ask questions so that they can offer more information to you that can be helpful to guide their performance planning. So hopefully there's 5 practices, like I said, that can help you to become more confident in your communication as leaders. We'll end with the content here. This idea of words provide the basis for human connection. Big picture here, right? I mean, we all have our day-to-day responsibilities that we need to do for work, and that's important. But at the end of the day, we all go home to our families, to our friends, to those that we care about. We're all people, we're all human, and words really do matter, just outside of work as well. So excuse my emotion, my goodness. All right, and just final reminder, once again, Dan's going to be presenting in February, so get signed up for that. It should be really fun, interactive and engaging. He is an amazing facilitator, so sign up and enjoy how to have your best possible relationships at work, even if it's difficult. Thank you all again for your time. You'll have access to this recording here within the next 24 hours or so. And get out there and do a good job. Appreciate all the work that you do. Thank you.